The room had a name, technically, buried somewhere in the Umbral Concord's own classified engineering archives, but nobody who had ever survived it called it by that name. They called it the Hollow because that was what it left behind in every mind that passed through it, a hollow space where certainty used to be. Jonah Pierce had been a cargo systems engineer before any of this, a quiet, unremarkable job aboard one of the earliest human survey vessels, the kind of career his own mother had once described as safe, back when safe still meant something reassuring rather than something faintly disappointing. He had volunteered for the Deep Survey mission 18 months earlier, one of 41 crew aboard a vessel called the Wayfinder, tasked with the quiet, unglamorous work of mapping the outer edge of human-monitored space, territory nobody expected to hold any particular danger, precisely because nobody expected it to hold anything at all. The Concord patrol that intercepted them had given no warning, no hail, no attempt at communication of any kind. One moment the Wayfinder was running its slow, methodical survey pattern. The next, its engines were dark, its crew scattered across 2 separate detention transports, and Jonah himself was strapped into a chair in a room built, with considerable and deliberate engineering care, to make him beg. The walls pulsed with a sickening violet light, precisely calibrated across 40 years of iterative testing to trigger acute stress responses in 96% of every known sentient species. The temperature swung between scalding and freezing every 40 seconds. No pattern, no warning. The floor itself transmitted a low, grinding subsonic frequency designed to induce nausea and disorientation in anything with an inner ear, a spine, or the alien equivalent of either. General Voth Khan had personally overseen its construction. He had watched hardened warlords weep within minutes of exposure. He had watched legendary assassins beg for mercy before he'd asked them a single question. The Hollow was, by every metric that mattered to him, his masterpiece, his testament to the science of suffering, and the human sitting in the center of it was laughing. Not a nervous laugh, not the thin, cracking sound of a mind starting to come apart at the seams. A real laugh, deep and genuine, the kind shared between old friends over a round of drinks. The human, designated in the detention log simply as Jonah Pierce, had been laughing on and off for nearly 20 minutes, and General Voth Khan, standing over him with 4 narrowed eyes and dorsal spines rising in open agitation, understood with a slowly dawning, deeply unwelcome clarity that this was the first interrogation of his considerable career in which he did not, even slightly, understand what was happening. "Something amuses you, creature," Voth Khan's voice hissed through the translator mounted at his throat. Jonah wiped tears from the corners of his eyes, still grinning. "I'm sorry, I really am. It's just wow, you guys really went all out with the spooky room aesthetic, huh? Very theatrical. I genuinely appreciate the effort." Voth Khan felt his secondary heart begin to race with something that was not quite anger and not quite confusion, but an unfamiliar blend of both. "You sit in a chamber engineered to break minds, human. Your world has been formally classified as forbidden. Your vessel was intercepted attempting to breach quarantine space. You face execution for violating conquered law, and yet you laugh. Well, when you put it that way, it does sound pretty bad." Jonah stretched his arms overhead, joints popping audibly in the chilled air. "But here's the thing, General Spiky, that's your name, right?" "General Voth Khan." Right, Voth. Sorry, I'm terrible with names." Jonah's grin widened. "Anyway, here's the thing, this whole scary room, this is basically just a Tuesday afternoon in Perth. Actually, no, this is nicer. At least you don't have the drop bears." Voth Khan activated his wrist interface without another word. The chamber's temperature plummeted to -30 degrees within seconds. Frost began forming immediately along the metal restraints of the chair. Jonah shivered, visibly, but did not stop smiling. "Okay, that's chilly, not gonna lie," he said. "But you know what's funny? My uncle went ice fishing in Manitoba a couple winters back. Sat in a little tent on a frozen lake for 8 hours at -40 just to catch a fish the size of his hand. For fun, we're weird like that." "Your physiology should be entering shock," Voth Khan said, checking his own readouts with a flicker of genuine disbelief. "Your core temperature should be dropping rapidly." "It probably is. I can definitely feel my toes going numb. Might want to turn it back up, though, because if I lose a couple toes to frostbite, I'm gonna be a lot less cooperative. Hard to take an interrogation seriously when you're mostly just worried about gangrene." Despite himself, Voth Khan adjusted the temperature back to a merely uncomfortable range, and immediately silently cursed his own reaction. The human had manipulated him, and worse, he had allowed it. "Let us try a different approach," Voth Khan said, circling the chair slowly, spine still faintly raised. "Your species has been classified a Death World species, Category 9. Do you understand what that means?" "I've got some idea, yeah. It means your planet is considered among the most hostile environments in charted space. Extreme temperature variation, hyperaggressive microbial life, predators occupying every level of the food chain, unstable tectonic activity, violent, unpredictable weather systems, frequent extinction-level cosmic events." Voth Khan leaned in close, his breath hissing against the human's face. "It means your species evolved inside hell itself, and that makes you monsters." Jonah tilted his head, considering this with genuine thoughtfulness. See, I always just called it Earth, but hell works too, I guess. Though honestly, the weather's been pretty mild lately. Climate stuff, big controversial topic back home, actually." Voth Khan slammed a primary manipulator against the wall hard enough to leave a dent in the reinforced alloy plating. "Do you not understand your situation, human? The conquered High Council has declared your species too dangerous to join the wider galactic community. Your planet is under permanent quarantine. Any human discovered beyond your home system faces immediate execution. You are the first taken alive in 3 full cycles." "Oh, so I'm special, that's nice." Jonah smiled warmly. "My mom always said I was special. Granted, she usually said it in kind of a disappointed tone, but still." "I will kill you," Voth Khan said softly, with the cold, absolute certainty of a man who had never once needed to repeat such a threat twice. "I will execute you personally. Slowly. I will broadcast your death across every human frequency we can reach, as a warning to any others who believe they can violate conquered law." Jonah looked up at him, and there was, genuinely, nothing in his eyes that resembled fear. "Okay." That single word, delivered with such total, casual indifference, struck Voth Khan like a physical blow. "Okay, that is your response. I threaten you with torture and death, and you say, okay. I mean, what else do you want me to say? You've clearly already made up your mind. You've got all the power here. If you want to kill me, kill me. Just maybe make it quick. I've got plans this weekend." A brief pause. "Well, had plans, probably gonna miss them now." Voth Khan felt his spines begin to tremble very slightly in a way he had not experienced since his own earliest years of command. This was wrong. Everything about this exchange was wrong. Fear was the foundation of order. Fear kept species in line, kept hierarchies stable, kept civilization functioning the way it was meant to function. But this human held no fear at all. None. "Why did you leave your planet?" Voth Khan demanded, changing tactics entirely. Humans are strictly forbidden from interstellar travel. How did you even acquire a functioning vessel? I built it, Jonah said simply. Well, me and about 40 other people. Took us 6 years. Lot of trial and error. Lost Petrov in a really unfortunate thruster accident, but he's fine now, full recovery mostly. You constructed a functional, faster-than-light vessel, without any external guidance or technical specification from another species. I mean, we had some help. Pulled a bunch of files off one of your old comm satellites. Really useful stuff, honestly. There was also this abandoned station out at the edge of our system. Somebody left an entire database behind. Figured you guys wouldn't miss it. Voth Khan felt a chill that had nothing whatsoever to do with the chamber's temperature. You reverse-engineered conquered technology from fragments and debris. Was that impressive? Seemed pretty straightforward once we cracked the basics. Physics is physics, right? Though I'll admit the artificial gravity took forever. Kept making everything either way too heavy or way too light. Had one test where Petrov floated up and got stuck to the ceiling for 3 hours. Good times, honestly. Impossible, Voth Khan muttered. The Conquered has been spacefaring for 12,000 years. Our technology represents millennia of accumulated knowledge. Jonah scratched his chin. Yeah, but here's the thing. 12,000 years spacefaring, you know what that tells me. Tells me you got comfortable. When you're comfortable, you stop innovating, stop taking risks, stop thinking outside the box. And humans are different, Voth Khan asked, curiosity momentarily overtaking his fury. Humans are idiots, Jonah said cheerfully. Absolute morons. We do things because someone told us we couldn't. We try experiments everybody agrees. Our terrible ideas. We build stuff that probably shouldn't work at all. And sometimes, just sometimes, we stumble onto something brilliant completely by accident. That is not how meaningful progress functions. Tell that to the guy who invented the microwave while working on radar systems. Or the scientist who discovered a whole new antibiotic because he forgot to throw out a moldy Petri dish. Or basically every major human breakthrough ever recorded. We're really good at screwing up in productive directions. General Voth Khan had commanded the Umbral Concord's frontier security apparatus for over 140 cycles, rising through the ranks on the strength of a reputation built almost entirely around a single, unbroken record. No prisoner interrogated within the Hollow had ever left it without providing everything the Conquered required of them. He had built that reputation deliberately, methodically, across decades of study into what he privately considered the single most important science any military officer could master, the precise architecture of fear, and exactly how to apply it. He had grown up on a border world himself, in his own distant youth, one that had suffered 2 separate incursions from a since-conquered rival power. And he had carried into his adult career a conviction that had never once, across 140 cycles, required serious revision. That a civilization's survival depended entirely on its capacity to make potential threats understand, immediately and completely, the cost of testing it. He tried a different tactic. You claim loyalty to your crewmates, human, yet you sit here, apparently unconcerned, while they remain scattered across a separate detention transport, likely undergoing precisely this same treatment even now. Does that knowledge trouble you at all? For the first time since the interrogation began, something flickered behind Jonah's easy composure. Not fear exactly, but something adjacent to it, a genuine tightening around his eyes. Yeah, he said quietly. It does. A lot, actually. But I figured out pretty early in this conversation that you're not gonna tell me anything useful about their condition no matter how much I beg, and panicking about things I can't control has never once solved a single problem in my entire life. So I'm choosing to trust that my crew is exactly as stubborn as I am, and that they're probably giving whoever's interrogating them just as hard a time as I'm giving you. A convenient rationalization. Maybe, or maybe it's just how you survive things you can't change. We get a lot of practice at that, growing up where we grow up. Voth Khan activated another control. Holographic displays flickered to life around the chamber, showing images of Earth, cities sprawling across continents, orbital platforms under active construction, massive vessels in various stages of assembly. We have been watching your planet, human. We see what you are building: warships, battle stations, weapons platforms. You claim to be explorers, and yet your actions suggest conquest. Jonah studied the images with genuine interest. Oh, yeah, that's the Defense Initiative. Started that after the first time one of your scout ships fired on one of our early probes. You guys just blew it up, no hello, nothing. Seemed kind of rude, honestly. So we figured, hey, maybe we should have some way to defend ourselves in case you decide to visit. That probe violated quarantine. That probe was a satellite we launched before we even knew you existed. We sent it out to take pictures of Neptune. Not exactly an act of war. Your species is aggressive, violent, dangerous. Our own psychological profiles confirm it. You evolved as apex predators on a world that tried to kill you every hour of every day. You wage war against one another constantly. Your entire culture glorifies conflict and competition. You are, by every metric this conquered possesses, a species that will threaten the peace and stability of the galactic community. Jonah was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke again, his voice had lost its earlier easy playfulness. You're right about some of that. We are violent. We do fight each other. We've done genuinely terrible things across our history. But you know what else we are? We're capable of change, capable of growth, capable of looking at our own mistakes and deciding actually to be better than that. Pretty words mean nothing. Maybe not, but here's what I know. Jonah leaned forward as far as his restraints allowed. You brought me here to scare me, to break me, to prove humans are dangerous and need to be contained. But you're scared, General. I can see it in the way your spines are quivering right now. I can hear it in your voice. You're absolutely terrified of what humans might become if we're actually given the chance. Voth Khan said nothing. The human had struck too close to something true. And the really funny part, Jonah continued, the part that actually makes me laugh, you're creating exactly what you're afraid of. You quarantine us. You attack our ships. You threat to kill anyone who leaves our system. You're training us to see you as the enemy. You're forcing us to militarize. You're guaranteeing the exact conflict you claim you're trying to prevent. Then what would you suggest? Voth Khan asked, his voice gone cold. That we simply allow a death world species to spread unchecked across the galaxy. That we ignore every statistical model predicting your species will destabilize interstellar civilization. I suggest you talk to us like people instead of threats. I suggest you give us an actual chance to prove we can coexist peacefully. I suggest you stop treating first contact like a military operation and start treating it like, I don't know, an opportunity. Jonah met his eyes steadily. We're not monsters, General. We're just people from a rough neighborhood trying to make it in a universe that's a lot bigger and a lot scarier than we ever imagined. The chamber door hissed open. Subcommander Naris entered, her scales flushed with visible urgency. General, apologies for the interruption, but we have a situation. This had better be important, Voth Khan growled. We have detected multiple human vessels entering the system, 23 ships. They are broadcasting a demand for the release of their crew member. Neris glanced toward Jonah nervously. They say they will not leave without him. Jonah grinned. Told you I had plans this weekend. Voth Khan felt his blood run genuinely cold. 23 ships. Your species barely possesses interstellar capability at all. Where did you acquire an entire fleet? Acquire, we built them. Thought we already established I come from a species of idiots who build things they probably shouldn't. Did you think I was the only one? Jonah laughed again, that same infuriating sound. General, I'm not even the smart one. My friend Priya's the actual genius. Real rocket scientist. Makes me look like a caveman banging rocks together. This is impossible. Our own intelligence reports suggested Earth possessed perhaps 5 or 6 functional vessels at most. Yeah, we kind of figured you guys were watching us. So we built a bunch of obvious decoy ships and kept the real fleet under construction out in the asteroid belt. Surprise. Neris pulled up a tactical display. The human ships appeared on screen, crude by conquered standards, asymmetrical, clearly cobbled together from mismatched components, but numerous, and their weapons signatures were registering active. Aboard the station's own gunnery deck, a young weapons officer named Dressacor watched the same display with a mounting unease she had not expected to feel against a fleet her own briefing materials had described, with total confidence, as primitive and unthreatening. I have 23 separate contacts, and no 2 of them share an identical weapons signature, she reported to her own section chief. It's like they built each ship out of whatever they happen to have lying around. I don't know how to build a targeting solution against a fleet with no consistent profile. Focus on the largest signatures first, her chief answered, though his own voice carried little of its usual certainty. Whatever they lack in uniformity, they cannot possibly match our own firepower. I hope you're right, Kor murmured, watching the human formation continue its slow, deliberate approach, because it doesn't look like they're bluffing. They are hailing us, General, Neris said. On screen, Voth Khan ordered. A human woman appeared in the holographic display, wearing a makeshift uniform assembled from what looked like spare parts and salvaged insignia. Behind her, a bridge full of humans-operated equipment that seemed held together with equal parts determination and optimism. This is Captain Sophia Marlowe of the human vessel Reckoning. You are currently holding Jonah Pierce, a citizen of Earth. We are requesting his immediate release. This is General Voth Khan of the Umbral Conquered. Your friend violated interstellar law. He faces execution for leaving quarantine space. Marlowe smiled, though it did not reach her eyes. General, with all due respect, we reject your authority to quarantine our planet. We didn't agree to your laws. We were never consulted. We were simply told we were too dangerous to be allowed outside our own solar system. That ends today. You dare threaten the Conquered? I'm not threatening anyone. I'm stating facts. We came here to get our friend. We're leaving with our friend. How much of your fleet you lose in the process is entirely up to you. Voth Khan felt his spine tips tingling with barely controlled rage. You have 23 primitive vessels. I command a battle station with sufficient firepower to sterilize continents. You cannot possibly believe you can win this confrontation. Winning isn't real. Lie the point, General. Marlowe leaned back in her chair. See, every single person on these ships volunteered for this mission knowing full well they might not come back. We're here because Jonah is one of us. Because we don't abandon our people. Because if someone threatens one human, they threaten all humans. That's kind of our thing. From his chair, Jonah called out cheerfully, Hey, Captain, Thanks for the rescue, but maybe don't start a whole war on my account." "Shut up, Jonah," Marlowe said fondly. "You got yourself captured, we get to rescue you dramatically. Those are the rules." "There are no rules for this situation," Voth Khan roared. "This is madness. You are outnumbered, outgunned, outmatched in every conceivable metric. Surrender now, and perhaps I will show mercy." "Counterproposal," Marlowe said calmly. "You release Jonah, we leave peacefully, and nobody finds out whether these shiny new weapons we built actually work. Because I gotta be honest, General, we're not entirely sure ourselves. Engineering estimates about a 60-40 chance they just explode when we fire them," Jonah added helpfully. "But hey, only one way to find out, right? You would sacrifice your ships, your lives for one person." "Yes," Marlowe said simply. "Every single time. That's what makes us human, General. We're loyal to a fault, stubborn beyond all reason, and just a little too stupid to know when we're beaten. We learned a long time ago that the only way to survive on a death world is to stick together, to never leave anyone behind, to fight for each other no matter the odds." Voth Khan looked at Jonah, who was watching the entire exchange with obvious, unmistakable pride. "You trained them to do this." "I didn't train anyone. This is just who we are." Jonah met his gaze steadily. "You can kill me. You can kill all of us, but more will come, and more after that, and more after that, because you made a mistake, General. You tried to cage us, and humans do not do well in cages." The tactical display showed the human fleet spreading into an attack formation, crude but effective, clearly built from careful study of conquered tactics. Naris spoke urgently. "General, the human vessels are charging weapons. They appear to be targeting our sensor arrays and communication relays. If they succeed, we will be unable to call for reinforcements." "They are bluffing," Voth Khan said, though genuine uncertainty had crept into his own voice. "Are they?" Jonah asked softly. "Because from where I'm sitting, it looks like they're about to start shooting. And once that starts, well, things tend to escalate pretty quick. That's another human trait. We're really, genuinely bad at de-escalation once someone throws the first punch." Voth Khan stared at the human seated in the chair before him. This creature who had laughed at torture, who had shown no fear whatsoever of death, who spoke of sacrifice and loyalty as though they were simple, unremarkable facts of existence rather than abstract ideals worth debating. A creature from a world so hostile that merely surviving childhood was, by any reasonable measure, an accomplishment worth genuine celebration. He thought, unbidden, of his own homeworld's second incursion, the one that had shaped the whole of his subsequent career, of standing as a young officer in a command bunker, while a rival power's fleet bombarded his own colony from orbit, of watching his own commanding officer weigh the cost of continued resistance against the near certainty of total destruction, and choosing, in the end, surrender. He had told himself, across 140 subsequent cycles, that the lesson of that day was fear's necessity, that had his own people possessed a weapon terrible enough, a reputation fearsome enough, the incursion would never have occurred at all. He had built the Hollow in no small part as his own answer to that long-ago surrender. And now, watching Captain Marlowe's fleet spread into formation above a station he commanded, watching a captured human laugh in the face of certain execution, he found himself confronting an uncomfortable, unfamiliar possibility, that the lesson he had spent a career building his entire doctrine around might have been, from the very beginning, the wrong one. For the first time in his long, distinguished military career, General Voth Khan realized he was afraid, not of the ships, not of the weapons, of the species itself, of what they represented, of what they might become. "Stand down your weapons," he said quietly to Neris. "General, stand down, release the prisoner." Jonah stood slowly as the restraints disengaged, rubbing his wrists, rolling his shoulders with an audible pop. "Smart choice, General. For what it's worth, I really do hope we can work things out peacefully. Despite everything, I genuinely think our species have a lot to learn from each other." "Your people are dangerous," Voth Khan said flatly. "Yeah, we are," Jonah agreed. "But he raised the thing about dangerous people. We make really good friends and really terrible enemies. You get to choose which one we become." He walked toward the door, then paused at the threshold. "Oh, and General, thanks for the hospitality. The scary room was cute. Maybe add some mood lighting next time, really set the ambience." And with that, the human left, still smiling, still entirely unafraid. Voth Khan watched the human fleet retrieve their crew member and depart the system. He remained on the observation deck long after they vanished from sensors, staring out at the stars. Neris approached cautiously. "What are your orders, General?" "Increase surveillance on the human system. Document everything, every ship, every weapon, every technological advance." Voth Khan was silent for a long moment. "And then we prepare. Because whether we admit it or not, the universe has changed. The Death Worlders are coming, and nothing will ever be the same." In the darkness of deep space, aboard the Reckoning, Jonah was reunited with his crew to cheers and laughter. They had pulled off something close to impossible, challenged the most powerful military force in known space, and lived to tell about it. As they began the long journey home, Jonah stared out at the stars and wondered quietly what came next. They had won this particular battle, yes, but the real war, humanity's actual place in the wider cosmos, was only just beginning. Somehow, despite everything, that thought made him smile. 3 months had passed since the incident at Concord Station 7. 3 months since Jonah Pierce had walked out of that interrogation chamber with a smile on his face, and something close to genuine fear planted, for the first time, in the heart of the galaxy's most powerful military institution. 3 months since humanity had proven, decisively, that it was not content to remain caged on its own hostile little world. Subcommander Neris of the Umbral Concord stood before the Galactic Council, her scales pale with stress. The council chamber was an architectural marvel, a sphere of transparent aluminum suspended in artificial zero gravity, with representatives from 47 different species floating at carefully calculated positions meant to demonstrate their respective political weight within the assembly. She hated it here. "The humans have established 17 permanent settlements beyond their home system," she reported, her voice steady despite her nerves. "They have colonized 3 moons, 2 asteroid belts, and 1 marginally habitable planet they have designated New Meridian. They claim it reminds them of home because, and I quote, everything there is actively trying to kill them." A delegate from the Corvani Reef, a coral-like collective intelligence that communicated through a series of slow, rhythmic light pulses across its translator, offered its own contribution to the growing unease filling the chamber. "Our own trade vessels have reported 3 separate encounters with human traders in the past month alone. In each case, the humans conducted themselves with what our captains describe as unsettling directness. No ritual courtesy exchange, no formal negotiation period, simply an immediate proposal followed by an immediate willingness to walk away if the terms were unfavorable. Our captains found this deeply disorienting." "Disorienting is not the same as dangerous," Neris pointed out. "No," the Corvani delegate agreed, its light pulses slowing thoughtfully. "But it is, at minimum, evidence that this species does not operate according to any framework this council currently understands. That uncertainty alone troubles several of my own colony's elders. A representative of the Threll Compact, a small, quadrupedal being whose translator carried a permanently anxious inflection regardless of the actual content of its speech, raised a trembling limb. I would remind this chamber that the humans have also, in this same period, resolved a labor dispute aboard a Threll mining platform that our own diplomats had failed to resolve for over 3 years. They simply arrived, listened to both parties for perhaps 6 hours, and proposed a compromise neither side had previously considered. It was accepted within a single day. A single incident proves nothing, Ambassador Ostrich said dismissively. It is not a single incident, the Threll delegate pressed. It is the 4th such case reported to this council in as many months. I do not say this to argue the humans are without danger. I say it because I believe this council does itself no favors by discussing them only in terms of the threat they might someday pose, while ignoring the considerable value they have already repeatedly demonstrated. High Counselor Vemoth pulsed with visible irritation. This council is not currently convened to catalog humanity's convenient good deeds, delegate. We are convened to determine whether an entire Category 9 species poses a structu. Ral risk to galactic stability. High Counselor Vemoth, a floating, jellyfish-like being from the 9th chorus, pulsed with visible agitation. This is unacceptable. The quarantine was established for the safety of every species represented in this chamber. These Death-Worlders cannot simply ignore galactic law. With respect, Counselor, Nara said carefully, they do not recognize the authority of laws they had no part in creating. They argue, quite effectively, that quarantining an entire species without its consent is itself a violation of the most basic principle of self-determination. They argue, Ambassador Ostrich cut in, a towering insectoid with compound eyes that never once blinked. You speak as though their arguments possess merit. They are Category 9 Death-Worlders. Statistical analysis grants them an 83% probability of initiating military conflict within 50 standard years of achieving interstellar capability. Those statistical models were constructed without any input whatsoever from actual humans, Neris pointed out. Perhaps that is precisely why they keep defying our predictions. The chamber erupted in a cacophony of overlapping sound. Clicking mandibles, whistling respiratory sacs, sharp electromagnetic pulses of pure outrage. The council was not accustomed to having its collective wisdom questioned, least of all by a subcommander from a military force that had, 3 months earlier, been publicly embarrassed by a handful of primitive newcomers. General Voth Khan materialized in the holographic space beside Neris. His presence alone was enough to silence most of the assembly. The general had become something of a legend across the preceding months, though not the kind of legend anyone particularly wished to become. The leader who had backed down to Death-Worlders, the general who had shown mercy. Some quietly called it wisdom, most far more loudly called it weakness. The humans have made contact, Voth Khan announced without preamble. They wish to address this council directly. The chamber fell silent, completely, utterly silent. Even the ambient hum of the translation matrices seemed, for a moment, to fade entirely. Impossible, High Counselor Vemoth finally managed. They have no legal standing, no formal recognition. They are quarantined criminals. They are a spacefaring civilization, whether we choose to acknowledge that fact or not, Voth Khan said coldly. They have proven themselves capable of projecting power well beyond their own system. They have established permanent settlements. They have developed weapons technology that, while crude, remains nonetheless effective. We can continue pretending they do not exist, counselor, or we can begin dealing with reality. You advocate recognizing them? After everything. Ambassador Ostrich's mandibles clattered with disbelief. You were the officer who recommended the strictest quarantine protocols this Concord has ever enacted. You called them an existential threat to galactic peace. I was wrong. The words seemed to cause Voth Khan genuine, physical pain to speak aloud. Not about the danger they pose, about how best to handle it. We cannot contain them. We can only decide whether they come to see us as friends or as obstacles. Before anyone could respond, the chamber's own communication system activated without any authorization whatsoever. The holographic display flickered, and a human face appeared abruptly at the center of the council chamber. A young woman with dark skin, bright, alert eyes, and a smile that suggested she knew exactly how many protocols she was actively violating, and found the entire situation genuinely hilarious. "Hello," she said cheerfully. "I'm Lieutenant Commander Layla Bishop of the Earth Diplomatic Corps. Sorry for crashing your party, but you guys keep declining our calls, and we figured, desperate times. Hope nobody minds too much." The council exploded into outrage. Multiple species began speaking simultaneously, their translation matrices overlapping into an incomprehensible tangle of demands, threats, and formal accusations. Layla waited patiently, still smiling, through nearly a full minute of chaos before finally raising one hand. "Are you guys done? Because I've got a presentation and it's actually really good. I made slides and everything." "This is a violation of every diplomatic protocol in existence," High Counselor Vemoth sputtered. "How did you even access our secured communication network?" "Oh, that was actually pretty easy, honestly. Your encryption's really solid, don't get me wrong, but you guys use the exact same security architecture across your entire network. Once we cracked the basic structure, it was just a matter of finding the right access point. Took our tech team about 3 days, maybe 4. They worked through the weekend." "You hacked the Galactic Council," Ambassador Ostrich said flatly. "We prefer to think of it as agar. Essive networking." Layla's smile widened. "But sure, hacking works too. Anyway, can I do my presentation now? I promise it's relevant to your interests." Voth Khan caught Neris's eye. She saw something there she had genuinely never before witnessed in her commanding officer's expression. Amusement. Real, unguarded amusement. "Let her speak," Voth Khan said. "I am curious to hear what humanity has to say for itself." Holographic displays materialized around Layla, showing images, streaming data, video footage cycling in rapid succession. She launched into her presentation with the total, unshakable confidence of someone who genuinely had nothing left to lose. "Okay, so first thing, we know you guys think we're dangerous. Fair point, honestly. Earth is kind of a nightmare world by galactic standards. Did you know we get storms that can level entire cities, geological events that can bury whole civilizations, predators that hunt us for sport, microorganisms that can kill us within hours? Yeah, it's pretty rough down there." She clicked to the next slide, showing a human child laughing in a sunlit park. "But here's the thing you need to actually understand about humans. We don't just survive our world, we thrive on it, we adapt, we overcome. We look at a challenge and go, hey, bet I can beat that. Sometimes we fail. Sometimes we die trying, but we keep going anyway." The next image showed human cities gleaming beneath a night sky, lights stretching to every horizon. You see aggression and violence. We see determination and resilience. You see a species that fights constantly. We see a species that never, ever gives up. Different perspectives, right? Your point, Commander, High Counselor Vemoth demanded. My point, Counselor, is that you're judging us based on fear instead of facts, so let me give you some actual facts. Layla pulled up a series of graphs and charts. In the 3 months since we broke quarantine, how many aggressive actions have we taken against conquered forces? 0. How many conquered ships have we fired upon? 0. How many territorial disputes have we initiated? 0. You established settlements in unclaimed space, Ambassador Ostrich interjected. Unclaimed being the operative word there. We didn't invade anyone. We didn't take anything belonging to someone else. We just moved into empty neighborhoods and started building homes. If that's a crime, then honestly every species in this council is guilty of the exact same thing. She clicked to another slide, showing human ships conducting what appeared to be a rescue operation. Here's something your intelligence reports probably missed entirely. 2 weeks ago, a Fireland cargo vessel suffered catastrophic engine failure near the Kessel Belt. They were drifting, life support failing, no rescue possible before their oxygen ran out completely. You know who picked up their distress call? Us, the dangerous Death Worlders. We diverted 3 ships and pulled every last one of them out before their systems gave out entirely. The chamber had gone genuinely, uncomfortably quiet. And last month we detected a rogue asteroid on a collision course with a conquered mining outpost. We sent them the trajectory data and offered to help divert it. They ignored us, probably because, we're supposed to be the bad guys. So we diverted it ourselves anyway, saved about 2,000 lives, never asked for credit, never made a big deal about it, just did it because it was the right thing to do. She clicked forward once more, this time showing footage of a crowded human concert hall, thousands of people singing together in ragged, imperfect unison. One more thing, actually, before I get to the point. You've heard about our disasters, our predators, our wars. You haven't heard much about this. We make music. We make art. We tell each other stories for absolutely no practical reason except that we like hearing them. We build parks in the middle of our most dangerous cities just so people have somewhere quiet to sit. A species that evolved entirely under threat, the way you keep describing us, shouldn't have room left over for any of that. But we do. We always have. I think that says something, too. High Counselor Vemoth's coloring shifted toward something considerably more contemplative. Why are you telling us this? Because you need to understand who we actually are. Yeah, we're tough. Yeah, we come from a world that would make most species break out in hives just thinking about it. Yeah, we're stubborn and aggressive and honestly way too confident for our own good. But we're also loyal and compassionate and genuinely excellent in a crisis. We're the species you want standing beside you when things go wrong. And if we refuse to accept you, Voth Khan asked, not as a challenge, but as a genuine, searching question. Layla's smile faded. For the first time, she looked entirely serious. Then we go our separate way, we build our own civilization, make our own alliances with whoever's willing to actually talk to us. We don't need your approval to exist, counselors, but we would genuinely prefer your friendship. She pulled up one final image, Earth from orbit, that familiar blue marble hanging quietly in the void. Look, I get it, we're scary, we're new, we're unpredictable. Change is terrifying, especially when it shows up uninvited and starts breaking all your rules. But we're not going away. We're here, we're staying. The only real question left is whether we do this as partners or as strangers who just happen to share the same galaxy. The council chamber remained silent for a long, waited moment. Then Ambassador Ostrich spoke again, his voice thoughtful now rather than hostile. You speak of partnership. What exactly are you proposing? Formal recognition, a seat at the table, Not charity, not mere tolerance, actual membership in the galactic community. In exchange, we agree to abide by established law, to contribute to shared defense, to participate fully in diplomatic process, and to generally try not to be too much of a pain in everyone's collective side. And if we discover you are planning military expansion, came a new voice, Counselor Ophira, a crystalline being who had remained silent until this exact moment. If you prove yourselves to be the threat we fear, then you have every right to defend yourselves. But maybe, just maybe, we could establish some kind of mutual inspection system. Some way for us to actually prove we're not building secret doomsday weapons or planning some grand galactic conquest. Transparency builds trust, or at least that's what our own diplomats keep telling me. Voth Khan spoke again. There is something you should know, Lieutenant Commander. This council has been debating for months now precisely how to handle humanity. Proposals have ranged from formal recognition all the way to preemptive military action. You have just made the strongest case yet for the former. Wait, preemptive military action? You guys were seriously considering attacking Earth? Layla's eyes widened. Okay, that's actually terrifying. Also, kind of flattering, honestly. Not sure how to feel about that. The proposal was rejected, Neris interjected quickly. The logistics alone would have been nightmarish, and the potential for retaliation was deemed unacceptable. Good call, because let me tell you, humans are really bad at proportional response. Someone hits us, we tend to hit back harder. Not a great trait. We're working on it. Therapy's helping. Despite the tension still hanging heavy in the chamber, several counselors made sounds their translation matrices rendered, uncertainly, as laughter. High Counselor Vemoth pulsed with a color that indicated, at last, genuine decision-making. This council will deliberate on your proposal. We will provide an answer within one standard cycle. That's about 4 days in human time, right? Yeah, we can wait 4 days. Just, maybe give us a heads up before you decide on that whole military action thing again. We'd really appreciate the courtesy. The hologram flickered before it cut out entirely. Layla added one final line just before the connection severed. Oh, and counselors, the fact that you're even considering talking to us instead of just trying to blow us up, that means a lot. Genuinely, thank you for that. The connection went dark. The council chamber remained quiet, each representative processing what had just occurred in their own particular fashion. Ambassador Ostrich turned toward Voth Khan. This is your doing. You let that human leave your custody. You showed them weakness, and now they are emboldened. I showed them respect, Voth Khan corrected. There is a difference. And if you believe respect to be a form of weakness, Ambassador, then you fundamentally misunderstand what makes any civilization capable of surviving itself. The 4 days that followed the transmission's end unfolded, within the Council's own private deliberation chambers, with a tension that several long-time delegates would later describe as unmatched by any prior vote in living memory. Ambassador Ostrich argued forcefully, across 2 full sessions, that recognition would set a precedent no future quarantine could ever meaningfully enforce again. If a Category 9 species can simply demonstrate sufficient force and eloquence to overturn a classification this council spent decades establishing, he said, then the classification itself becomes worthless. Every dangerous species we have ever quarantined will look to this vote as proof that patience and provocation, rather than genuine change, are the actual path to acceptance. Counselor Ophira, the crystalline delegate who had first raised the question of mutual inspection, offered a considerably more measured counterargument. I do not dispute the risk, Ambassador. I dispute the alternative. We have already seen in miniature what continued. Quarantine produces a species with genuine capability, genuine grievance, and now genuine proof that our own military cannot contain them if they choose otherwise. I would rather negotiate with a partner who has chosen cooperation than continue provoking an adversary who has already demonstrated they do not require our permission to act. The thrilled delegate, still carrying its permanently anxious inflection, spoke once more on the deliberation's final day. I would ask this council to consider a simple question before it casts its vote. Which outcome genuinely frightens us more? A humanity granted provisional membership, bound by the obligations and inspections such membership requires, or a humanity left entirely outside our structures, answerable to no one, building whatever it wishes in whatever quantity it wishes, with no formal channel through which this council might ever meaningfully influence its choices. General Voth Khan, called to testify before the assembled delegates one final time, offered an account that several present would later cite as decisive in swaying the vote's narrow final margin. I built the hollow to break the will of anyone who entered it, he told them. In 140 cycles of command, it never once failed. It failed against a single, unremarkable human engineer who considered it, in his own words, a Tuesday afternoon. I do not say this to recommend surrender to fear. I say it because I believe this council must reckon honestly with the limits of what fear can actually accomplish against a species that has already, collectively, decided it will not be afraid. We built our entire quarantine doctrine around the assumption that sufficient threat produces sufficient compliance. Humanity has proven that assumption false. I would ask this council to build its next doctrine around what has actually proven true, rather than what we once found comfortable to believe. 4 days later, the council reconvened. The vote proved close, contentious, genuinely fractious. Several species threatened outright withdrawal from the council entirely should humanity be granted recognition. Others argued with equal passion for immediate acceptance. In the end, by a margin of just 3 votes, humanity was granted provisional membership in the galactic community. Provisional meaning temporary, probationary, subject to ongoing review, but membership nonetheless. When Layla Bishop received the news, she did something very distinctly human. She cried, not from sadness or fear, but from a relief and joy so total it briefly overwhelmed every other feeling she carried. Then she composed herself, straightened her uniform, and prepared to tell her people that they were no longer alone in the universe. On Earth, in the hastily constructed headquarters of the newly formed diplomatic corps, Jonah Pierce watched the announcement with quiet satisfaction. He had, by that point, been promoted to Special Advisor on Extraterrestrial Relations, a title that sounded considerably more important than it actually was, mostly amounting to permission to tell the story of the time he'd made an alien general back down purely by laughing. "Think it'll actually work?" asked Sophia Marlowe, visiting Earth for the first time in months. "Think we can really make this partnership thing happen?" "Honestly, no idea," Jonah grinned. "But when has not knowing ever stopped us before?" Across the galaxy, aboard the Umbral Concord's own command station, General Voth Khan received a personal message. It was from Jonah Pierce. Just a handful of words. "Thanks for taking a chance on us, General. We'll try not to blow it. Probably. No promises." Voth Khan found himself making a sound the translator would have identified as laughter, had anyone been present to hear it. The humans were going to be exhausting, infuriating, wildly unpredictable, but perhaps, just perhaps, they would also be exactly what the wider galaxy actually needed. Something new, something dangerous, something against every one of his own careful predictions vital. The most widely retold incident from that early period involved a human structural engineer named Priya Anand, dispatched as part of the first joint research exchange, who spent 3 sleepless days redesigning a conquered orbital habitat's failing support lattice using nothing but salvaged materials, and what her own conquered colleagues initially dismissed as reckless improvisation. The habitat, home to nearly 4,000 conquered citizens, had been scheduled for full evacuation and decommissioning after its original engineers declared the structural failure unrecoverable within any reasonable time frame. Anand disagreed loudly and repeatedly until her own supervisor finally allowed her 48 hours to attempt a solution nobody else believed existed. She delivered it in 31. "I don't actually know if it was brilliant or just incredibly lucky," she told a Concord journalist afterward in an interview that would later be reprinted across a dozen different networks. "Probably some of both, but nobody had told me it was impossible until after I'd already started, and by then I figured I might as well finish." 6 months after humanity joined the galactic community, the first joint human-conquered research station was established. 1 year after that, human engineers solved a propulsion efficiency problem that had stumped conquered scientists for decades. 2 years after that, a human doctor developed a cure for a plague that had been quietly ravaging the outer colonies for a generation. Were there other problems along the way? Absolutely. Humans started bar fights, violated protocols with a frequency that drove several senior diplomats to genuine distraction, generally made nuisances of themselves in ways that filled entire volumes of formal conquered complaint records. But they also saved lives, pushed boundaries nobody else had thought to push, refused, with a stubbornness that bordered on the pathological, to accept that anything was truly impossible. The galaxy changed, not overnight, not easily, but it changed. And in the halls of the Galactic Council, a plaque was eventually installed, its text rendered in 47 different languages. It read, "Here we learn that fear of the unknown is not wisdom, that caution without understanding is cowardice, that the most dangerous species in the galaxy are not those who evolved on harsh worlds, but those who refuse to evolve at all." Below that, in considerably smaller text that everyone quietly pretended not to notice but privately found hilarious, someone had added, "Also, never threaten a human with death. They will just laugh at you. Trust us on this one." General Voth Khan never did discover who had added that particular line, but he had his suspicions. And whenever he crossed paths with Jonah Pierce at some subsequent diplomatic function, the human would give him a small, knowing wink and a smile that suggested he knew exactly what the general was thinking. Some days Voth Khan genuinely missed the simplicity of the old universe, the one where everything made sense, where every species stayed neatly within its assigned box, where dangerous newcomers remained safely quarantined on their own nightmare worlds. But most days, he admitted only to himself, he found he preferred this new reality. This chaotic, unpredictable, thoroughly human-infected galaxy. It was terrifying, it was frustrating. It was, on more occasions than he cared to formally document, exhausting. It was, somehow, also considerably better. And when his own subordinates eventually asked him how to handle humans, how to predict what they might do next, he gave them the only advice that had ever actually seemed to work. Expect the unexpected, prepare for chaos, and whatever you do, never ever mistake their laughter for weakness, because humans laugh loudest when they are at their most dangerous, and they are always, always considerably more dangerous than you think. The mutual inspection system Counselor Afira had first proposed during the crisis's most tense negotiating session was formally implemented within the first year of humanity's provisional membership. A program that Layla Bishop herself, promoted to Earth's first permanent liaison to the Council, oversaw personally through its difficult, occasionally awkward early stages. Conquered inspectors toured human shipyards, human research facilities, human military installations, cataloging capability with the same careful thoroughness the Concord's own intelligence apparatus had once applied to purely hostile surveillance. Human inspectors, in turn, received reciprocal access to Concord facilities, a novelty that took considerably longer for Concord officials to grow comfortable with than anyone on the human side had anticipated. "I keep waiting for someone to tell us we've overstepped," Layla admitted during an early briefing with her own small diplomatic staff, "and it just doesn't happen. I think that's actually the biggest adjustment for them, not that we're capable of scary things, that we're willing to let them watch us build them." The program's first genuine test arrived 18 months in, when a routine inspection uncovered an unauthorized weapons research initiative operating out of a private human shipyard, funded by interests that had never fully accepted the Council's provisional membership terms, and had continued quietly developing capability outside any sanctioned oversight. Layla herself flagged the violation directly to the Council, rather than attempting to manage it quietly through internal human channels, a decision that several of her own government's more cautious advisors argued against strenuously. "I understand the instinct to handle this ourselves," she told them in the meeting where she overruled that advice. "But the entire value of this inspection system is that it's genuinely mutual. If we start quiet, lie covering for our own violations the first time one actually happens, we've proven every skeptic in that council right, and we've proven it in the worst possible way. By breaking our word the very first time keeping it actually cost us something." The shipyard's operators faced formal Concord sanction alongside human legal consequence, a joint resolution that Ambassador Ostrich himself, still humanity's most consistent skeptic on the Council, cited afterward as the single incident that most meaningfully shifted his own long-held reservations. "They did not need to report their own violation to us," he admitted, in a rare moment of public reconsideration. "They chose to. I have spent a career assuming that a species this capable of deception would eventually choose deception when it mattered most. I confess, I did not expect to be wrong about that so early or so decisively." Earth's first official ambassador to the Galactic Council was predictably entirely unpredictable. She arrived late to her very first official session because she had stopped to help a janitor whose cleaning drone had malfunctioned in the hallway outside. She delivered her inaugural speech entirely in verse because she thought it sounded cooler that way. She wore sneakers beneath her formal robes because, in her own direct words, "Comfort is a basic human right, and these floors are enormous." The council was scandalized, outraged, thoroughly bewildered, and very slowly, unmistakably charmed. Because that was, in the end, the thing about humans. They proved almost impossible not to like once you actually got to know them. Warm where other species ran cold, funny where others stayed relentlessly serious, quick to make friends and quicker still to form loyalties that lasted entire lifetimes. They were, in every meaningful sense, exactly what they had always claimed to be: people from a rough neighborhood, trying to make it in a universe considerably bigger and considerably scarier than they had ever fully imagined. And the universe, despite its own considerable initial reluctance, was slowly, steadily learning to make room. Jonah Pierce eventually retired from formal diplomatic service. He opened a bar on New Meridian, a modest, unpretentious place where humans and aliens could sit together, drink together, and trade stories long into the local night. It became genuinely famous across multiple systems, not for its drinks, which were, by most honest accounts, fairly questionable, but for its atmosphere. On the wall behind the bar, Jonah hung a small, battered souvenir from his time in that conquered interrogation chamber. A single piece of the chair he had once sat in, laughing in the face of certain death. A quiet reminder that sometimes the single scariest thing a person could do was simply refuse to be scared. Above it, in letters large enough for every patron to see clearly, hung a hand-painted sign that read, "Welcome to the end of the universe. We serve everyone, we judge no one, and we never ever give up on anybody, because that's just what humans do." It was cheesy, it was deeply sentimental. It was, in every conceivable way, thoroughly, completely, unmistakably human. Voth Khan visited exactly once, nearly a decade after the incident at Concord Station 7, arriving unannounced, and by his own private admission to Neris beforehand, more than a little uncertain whether he would even be welcome. He found the bar exactly as reputation had described it. Loud, cramped, gloriously mismatched. Its walls covered in mementos from a dozen different species. Its air thick with the smell of grilled food he did not recognize and music he found, despite himself, difficult not to enjoy. He sat at the bar, ordered something called whiskey that burned his throat and made his spines tingle unpleasantly for a solid hour afterward. Jonah served him personally, that same infuriating smile still fixed on his face, though considerably more gray now threaded through his hair than Voth Khan remembered from the hollow. "Didn't expect to see you all the way out here, General," Jonah said, sliding the glass across the worn wooden bar top. "I find myself, on occasion, curious about how the universe has continued to change since our last conversation," Voth Khan admitted. "I understand you retired from formal service some time ago." "Yeah, diplomacy's exhausting work, turns out. Figured I'd rather pour drinks for people trying to get along than sit in rooms full of people arguing about whether they should." Jonah nodded toward the crowded room behind them, where a Corvani delegate and a human dockworker were, incomprehensibly, arm wrestling to the enthusiastic cheers of a mixed crowd of at least 6 different species. "Turns out most people, once you actually get them in the same room without a podium between them, figure it out pretty fast." "Still think we're monsters, General?" Jonah asked. Voth Khan considered the question with genuine, unhurried care. Around them, humans and aliens laughed together, shared meals together, traded stories that stretched long into the local night. Species that had never once meaningfully interacted before were, slowly and visibly, forming genuine friendships. Barriers were falling. Understanding, however haltingly, was growing. "No," Voth Khan said finally. "I think you are something considerably more dangerous than monsters. You are hope, and hope is the most infectious, most unstoppable force this universe has ever produced." Jonah raised his glass. "I'll drink to that." And they did. Across the galaxy, on 1,000 worlds and stations scattered from one edge of the settled quadrant to the other, humans were making their mark, not through conquest, and not through violence, but through sheer persistence and heart, and that stubborn, unshakable refusal to ever fully give up that had, in the end, defined their species from the very beginning. The Death Worlders had arrived, and the universe would never be quite the same again. But that, as humans like to say, was very much a good thing. Change always was,